Reminder.
It was understandable. 3 to 30 minutes.
I have to do 30-minute presentation on a project that we're not giving it on tomorrow. So I'm going to do
I'm not on that level. I don't know.
lots.
The level of hardcore.
I'm not ready for it, but I'm going to do it.
I mean, yeah.
I'll force myself to do it.
30 minutes recently.
Yep. I have to send it to him by Wednesday.
Okay.
That's what I was thinking. People will back off if you don't want to do that.
So this is the new system. I'm going to try to not make a mistake recording. So this is this rectangle that's recording. Also, I'm going to try to point this in the right direction. Maybe put it over here so it has a better chance of recording the screen. Like that. Okay. Let's see if this is any good. Okay, let's get going, guys. So, as usual, we have a lot of stuff to cover. Here I have a list of all the questions that people were confused by in the homework, or in the reading. And I'm going to go through them, and for about, somebody help me watch about 15 minutes and cut me off, and then we'll go on some other time. So I'm just going to go through them. I'm going to give my answer. You can ask follow-up questions, or ask me to say it again if you don't understand. Okay? So the first question that came up a lot is, how are fixtures different from seed data, different from inputting data in general? And the answer is a hand wave. You're seeing, in a way, in Rails, the evolution of testing. And so you'll see several different ways of doing the same thing. They serve different purposes. It turns out that as you start writing more tests, you're going to find this phenomenon called brittle tests. Brittle tests are tests that whenever you change your code a little bit, break, because you made an assumption about the data. Okay, so C data is built into C.RB, and it's the most fixed. If you have some examples that are really standard, really common, then you might put them in C. Also, typically, if you think you're going to need them in production, like things like zip codes and so on. Test fixtures are pieces of database, but often in memory. Like you might just say, user.create, put it in a variable and use that to do a test on. And that's another way to create test data. And then there's another way, which is something called mock objects. And mock objects are objects that are built literally inside the test just for the purpose of doing one test. And I'll show you guys that later. So the answer is don't be surprised that you saw several different ways of doing the same thing. As you get a little bit more sophisticated, you will start realizing which tool you want to use for what purpose. Okay? Certainly start with C. That's the easiest. I would just start using that. While I'm on that topic of testing, the examples in the book, I think, are a little bit excessive in terms that they show you the techniques, but I think they show you testing things that you don't really need to be testing, in my opinion. Okay? You don't need to double check that when you do a has many or belongs to, that Rails actually properly handles that, because it will. You don't even need to test that if you do a validation that's a simple one, like it has to be present or it has to be text. You don't need to test that. The validation, the Rails is well tested itself. But these are the low-hanging fruit, very easy examples to start with, which is why you always start with those. But while it's really important to learn testing, and I'm going to have a whole class on that very soon about testing to show you examples, the question of what you test and what you don't test is one, again, that develops with, with experience as you sort of see what works. And you will write some tests that later on you go like, I don't know why I wrote this because it's always succeeding, or it took a lot of work and it's not really testing anything. But for now, the focus is to learn the concept of a unit test and to write them and get the hang of it, okay? Another person asked, why do we even need unit tests if we have validations already? Who wants to answer that? Aren't validations and unit tests doing the same thing? Yes?
Regression testing, so if you change something to know that it still works after the fact?
Right, that's one reason, but that's not even the best one. Yes, George?
Unit tests cover like every functionality, and validation is
Right.
just one functionality.
That's true, but it's not, what I'm looking for is this. Validation is part of your application. It's part of your application logic. Tests, by definition, stand outside of that application logic to test the application logic, okay? So they're not redundant in the sense that, this feature exists, and so why should I test it? Now, they are redundant only in as much as the reason I gave before, which is you can trust that validations work. But unit tests, by definition, or tests by definition, are not part of your application. you throw them out when you go into production. You throw them out when you put it up on the server. Okay, so that's why they're very different animals, and often you'll find and you have the strange phenomenon when you're writing tests, which is I just wrote the code to do A, B, C, D, E. Now I've got to write another bunch of code that basically checks A, checks B, checks C, checks D, checks E. And you go like, I'm writing the same code twice, and that's kind of true. You're verifying that what you wrote on one side actually does what you thought it was, which is why, of course, you don't want to have any duplicated code. There's no point in using the code you wrote to be the code being tested. Okay? A lot of people said, in different words, Rails is so magical. There's so many directories. How will I ever know what's really going on? And what is this configuration versus convention thing again? Well, it's true. Rails has a lot of magic, quote-unquote magic. You find that if you don't, and some of you who have worked in other languages have pointed this out, you find if you don't have that magic, in other words, if you do it by hand, if you're working straight up in JavaScript or straight up in Java, you find that you're writing a lot of repetitive code. I mean, if every time you wrote a validation that a field has to be greater than 0, you have to write the test. You have to write the thing that runs the test. You have to write the thing that prints the error message. You have to write the thing that checks if there are any errors. You have to write the same thing over and over and over again. And yeah, you know exactly what's going on, but you're writing twice as much code. So in Rails, they kind of make the decision, no, we're gonna simplify it. We're gonna standardize what it means to specify that a certain field in a database needs to have certain characteristics, and from that one declaration, suddenly you have all these things that kind of fall out for free, including testing. Okay, so the convention versus configuration is sort of the source in a way from which a lot of this magic comes. Similarly, you all read that Rails has 3 databases: a test database, a production database, and a development database. Why 3? Why not 4? Why not 5? Why not 0? Well, they could have just said, when you launch Rails, you can say what database to use, and then you have to sort of figure out how to have the number of databases you want. They decided that 9 out of 10 cases, the common scenario is people have those 3 databases, so they build them in. And with that comes magic, because now you go like, okay, but where are these 3 test databases declared? And why is it called test and not testing? And by the way, what if I want 2 different test databases? Well, you can do all that, but then you have to sort of go a little bit deeper to get around the conventions, okay? But there is a lot of magic, and it is a common complaint about Rails, is that it does too much automatically. Why is this random matching of names of the database with the name of the model, with the name of the has many, purely by the coincidence that I called them the same thing? Well, they found in practice that people did call them the same thing, and you could save a lot of typing if you recognize that. And so the magic is part of having fewer lines to type, okay? And if you're feeling a little bit dizzy about the magic, welcome to the club. A lot of people feel that. You'll learn it as you go. Try not to let it bother you too much.
How do you master the magic is the question.
Say what?
How do you master it?
Time. And don't try to master all of it at once. I mean, a lot of things you can just trust they will just work, and they will just work. You'll see a lot of these things. Why, link to item. Why does that work? How does it know it's called an item? Well, I can explain to you how it knows, but by and large, the magic does the right thing. Yeah, George.
Like having all these magic, let's say, and then I want to change something.
Yeah.
Is there a magical way to change it at all places? For example, I want to change the name of a model class.
Right.
Then
No.
I have to change the table name, the class name, the controller name, the
Yeah.
view name,
Yeah.
everything.
No, yes, you do. Yes, you do. Which reminds me of another thing that was a little bit of cause for confusion. Let's say you ran the scaffold generators, and it created the views and the models and all this stuff, right? And you said, I want to run the scaffold again because I have a typo in the name of the whatever, of the field. If you run the scaffold again, it's going to regenerate those files. So if you've gone in and modified any of those files that were generated for you before, those modifications are lost. Because the generator, it does give you an error saying there's file already there, you sure you want to overwrite it. But it does not know how to surgically preserve your modifications to, item view dot erb dot whatever, while still changing the fields that it generated. It just can either regenerate the field or not. Did you have something? Oh, Somebody said I changed the migration file, and obviously that was the wrong thing to do. You know, the migration file that's created by when you do create a migration. Yes and no. Okay, yes, if you follow the law of migrations perfectly, that's true. But if you think about why we have migration files, I mean, remember, all these are just Ruby programs. The reason we have migration files is once I have production data, then it makes it easy for me to make sure that I can roll back or roll forward if there's a change. However, early in the development, where all of you guys are, it's perfectly valid to go and look at your let's say you have 3 tables. So you have 3 migration files, 1 for each table, that were created when you first said Rails generate model or Rails generate resource. You have those 3. And you can certainly keep on adding migrations because you have to add another table, before you know it, you're going to have 25 migration files, the first 3 and then every little modification, which you could argue is a little confusing. But there's nothing wrong before you have any dependencies, no other database is relying, to modify those initial 3 migration files to put the things in you want and just rerun it, just reset the whole thing and start over. And so I do that when I'm coding. So there you're fighting the magic a little bit. There's no harm in doing it the obvious way, which is just create more migrations, but it becomes less and less clear and a little bit less neat. So it's up to you. So actually, there are legitimate times when when it's legitimate to modify the migration files. Okay. What's the story? How did the error reporting appear when I had a validation error? Nice in the form, it would say, age less than 0. It would even put a red box around the age that was red. How does that, can I defeat that? Well, if you look closely, and I'm not going to dig into the code right now, at the forms that are created by the scaffold generator, you will see the HTML that uses that is valid and the dot errors that I showed you the other day. It uses them to generate those error messages, and it places them clearly on the page with HTML. So there's no magic involved, actually. And if you decide you want to display that error somewhere else, or not at all, or in a different font, you can just go look at the corresponding view files, and you'll see the HTML there, clear as day, if you look a little bit, and you can modify it. So there's no particular magic. It's just that the scaffold made an assumption about where you probably want the error messages displayed. Okay? I think I'll stop here because I see blank stares. So I'm going to stop here and change gears to something else because those were the big ones. I have a bunch more, which maybe next time I'll pick up and do a few more. Okay. About the homework granularity question that was posed. I didn't look recently. It looked like not a lot of people mentioned something about it, but I understand where George is coming from. So I have a suggestion, a little bit different, a third option, which I'm willing to commit to, or do my best to commit to, which is that by Sunday night, the homeworks in the current format are all written up and won't change during the week. So you can look Sunday night before I go to sleep. I'll make sure that for Tuesday and Thursday and Friday, the homeworks are written up and that I won't change it. So if you want to plan your week, you can look at it there and it'll be done. I know I've done some last minute changes. Generally, I have a good excuse, but I understand it's inconvenient for you. So I'm willing to do that. Now, does that help at least address part of your problem? Okay. And I think that's doable. I mean, this is the one thing you guys are subjected to is this is the very first time this course is taught. And so it's dynamic. I mean, things are changing as I see, where I need to spend more time or where I should spend less time. Okay? Okay, good. All right. So basically, I'm picking up the stuff that I was not able to do last time because, we ran out of time on Tuesday and on Thursday we didn't have any class. Okay, so I'm gonna quickly talk about. We're gonna go a little bit deeper now into the mechanics of model view control. I'm gonna review for you. This is hyper important, so give yourself a slap if you feel asleep. By the way, did everybody give Valentine cards or calls to all your appropriate targets? If you haven't, you know who you are. Do it. Okay, I got a card from my wife. All right, so this is important. and I'm going to go through this, and then I'm going to dive into how the URLs work. But basically, and I've talked about this before, I'm going to do it one more time just to really drive it home. So remembering from practically the first day, you type a URL into your browser, and we want to talk about what happens. Now we're talking about really general MVC principles, but really I'm going to talk about Rails right now. Okay? So the URL comes in, and the gets sent to the Rails server. The Rails server parses it and identifies the part after the host name, so after brand.edu/, grabs that piece and analyzes it to figure out what the clauses are after each of those slashes. And its purpose is to identify which controller is going to handle this request. The part of the system that does that is called the router. The router is declared in the file routes.rb in the config subdirectory, and I'm going to show you more about that in a minute. The router analyzes this not only to figure out what controller is going to handle it, but within that controller, what action. Generally, I don't have a, oh yeah, here. This is a bad example. Imagine if it said instead brand.edu/student/index. Okay, generally, this is just applying some defaulting. I won't get into that. The part of the path before the leaf will tell you the controller. So in this case, it's /users. In this example that is being used, it's going to find the user's controller, and then the fact that it's /users/index means it's going to tell. This is just an RD file in the controller subdirectory. It's going to look for a file called user_controller, and it's going to look within that a class declaration for the controller, and in that a method declaration, which is the action. So you'll find class users controller inherited from such and such, and then within that def index. So the router is going to look for those two things. If it does not find it, you get an error. If it finds that it calls that index, just call it, just a method, it calls it. That controller's job is to grab whatever data is necessary to create the response. Now, the response in this case is a list of users. So brand.edu/user/index. So index means a list of the users. So it's going to ask the database, give me a list of all the users. The database is going to send back to it as a collection, a Rails collection of users. And it's going to, the controller is going to put that result in an instance variable, and then pass control onto the corresponding view. The corresponding view is an ERB file. If you remember, an ERB file is a template which includes snippets of Ruby embedded in a body of HTML. Okay, the snippets of Ruby get executed, and they expand into more HTML. That's what the view does. So in this case, it will be looking for a file called in the directory /apps/views/users/index.html.erb. It's going to find that file. It's going to expand it, which is going to turn into a bunch of HTML. It's going to return it to the controller. The controller is going to return it back to the browser. That's the whole story. Okay, that's how it all works. Yeah. I'm glad you're asking, because I'm sure you're not the only one. So thank you for your courage. Everybody, listen, go ahead.
What if it's a question no one else has? I'm still a bit confused about the step where the controller gives something to the view.
Yeah.
I'm just trying to think.
You don't see that in the code.
Right, when we were doing that, I don't remember ever having a controller that's passing an object or anything to a view.
You're right. You're absolutely right. So let me grab a little code here. That's very observant of you, because that's a bit of the magic, unfortunately for us. Depot.
Yeah, you're not recording that.
I know that. I'm just waiting for the editor to come up, and then I'll put it in the corner here. Depot. Okay, now I'm going to look at the controllers in app. Controllers. Sorry, in the controllers. I'm going to look at products controller. Let's take index. Right? And you're saying, my God, Peter, you say it's going to go to the view, but I don't see it. Very, very good point. It turns out that the default behavior of actions in the controller is at the end of the method, automatically go to look for the appropriate view, render it, and return it. Now, that's the default case. Here it gets a little bit more interesting. Okay? Here, they want to allow, and I'm going to just do this superficially, we'll come back to that later. They want to allow a URL that's either /products or /products.json. That's another format. Now, it could be .xml. What's going on there is that it wants the server to actually return either HTML or, under certain circumstances, the same information in a different format called JSON. And so here you have a slightly more complicated construct where the controller actually says, in the event that HTML has been requested, then do this. But if JSON was requested, then do that. This body of code collapses into nothing in the default case. So in the default case, like here, it's automatically going. So you're right. Now, there are two more things it does, because if you think about it, I'm setting up app products here, which is an instance variable within an instance of the class products controller. Somehow, when I get to the view, I'm in a different class altogether, in a different instance altogether. Well, yes, you're right. And the dispatcher that dispatches the controller takes care of collecting whatever instance variables are left behind here. It can be anything you want. In fact, there's even some extra ones. And then making them available within the view.
And so within the view, how do you get access to them? Is that the
No, it's actually exactly this. Let's look at the view. So the view that corresponds to that is products index. And you see here,
oh, okay.
there it is.
Yeah.
Okay? So this thing has been set up for you for free by the dispatcher that dispatches first to the controller action, then to the view. Okay? Any other questions? Okay. Continuing. Right, okay, so that's that. So I think I've said all this, but let me just check. Let me just enlarge this so people can see it. Yeah, this is all, you can reread this, but this basically stuff I've covered already. So it's already been covered, okay? Right, so let me move on to the next related topic. So now, so that was that, model review. Now we're going to talk about the URI or the URL, which I've talked about a lot before, but you've discovered my style is to sort of circle in and give it a little bit more detail every time. So, first of all, can anybody say why there are URLs and URIs, what the difference is, why those two terms even exist? Has everybody heard both those terms? Anybody? Yeah.
URL is used in like website.
Yeah.
URI is used within the application to kind of get like resources in different directories.
Not exactly. Anybody else have ever heard the term URI before? Never knew what they were, right? They're used synonymously, actually, very often. URL stands for Uniform Resource Locator. And URI stands for Universal Resource Identifier. And there's a little bit of history, okay? The original web server, when you type the URL in, the stuff after the slash was actually a path. It was literally, there was a root directory on the app server, on the web server, and in there would be some files. And they would be foo.html files. It could be index.html, literally on the server would be a directory of all the files. Or there may be a subdirectory called customers, and in that subdirectory there would be foo.html again. And so literally, I covered this so you couldn't immediately read back to me what I had written down. So literally, they have a website, like the original, Tim Berners-Lee web server was running and looked at the file system, looked for a file called user slash and subdirectory users and a file they called index.html. If it was there, returned it. That's all it did. Very, very simple. Okay? So locator and resource kind of implied that, in fact, there was a resource there and we were locating. But along came smarty pan people that said, why do those files actually have to be there? Why don't I have the directory empty and have a little program that runs, takes that path, parses it, and produces some data and return that? Because, I have 10,000 users, right? Why should I have 10,000 individual HTML files on this disk waiting in case somebody asks for user/41 or 9,099? I have them in a database anyway. I'll wait until somebody asks for /user/9,999. I'll get the record out of the database. I run a little shell script on it, do a little sed or whatever awk or whatever strange Unix thing, and generate an HTML file and send it back. That's much easier. It's much more efficient. I don't have to create all these files, et cetera, et cetera. That's how it started. Okay. So now suddenly there was no resource to locate because the resource actually was created on the fly upon request. Right? And that's obviously the way things work today. Not always. So to sort of drive home that point, they said, let's call them URIs, because now often the information after the host name in a URL doesn't correspond to anything that really exists. It's a marker, it's a flag, it's a command, it's any number of things. Okay? So let's look at some really ugly examples. Okay, wait, before I go to that, and let me just say that right after thinking of your schema in your product and thinking about your UI paper prototype or UI flow, I would say the next most important design decision for you to make is the URL, the structure of the URL, the syntax and semantics of the URL, because that is going to determine, in large part, the overall architecture of your Rails application. Okay? So it's a very important initial design step to take. And that's what I'm going to talk about a lot. So as I said, so you have this domain, sample.edu/, and you have text. And since a program is sitting there looking at this text and parsing it, it's kind of a little language, right? And it has a certain syntax. And the question is, how should I define this language to be most useful and most easy to support? And there's some other benefits which I won't get into. There's a lot of choices because it's open-ended. Because as you remember the old server, they just had a little shell script that looked at this thing and transferred the database and came up with an HTML file. So you could say silly things like room scheduler /reserve/room/3. Or you could say bookstore /gone with the wind /order/3. Or you could say NewYorkTime.com /latest-updates year 2014. These are all legitimate and legal URLs. Okay? But it turns out, and this is one of these things that has been discovered or designed or invented, take your pick, or just experienced. And this is what how engineering is a little bit different from software for computer science, that if you follow certain patterns, a lot of the architectural decisions fall into place much more neatly, and you end up writing more reliable, more secure code that you get done much quicker. So here are some other examples, and I'm going to explain why they are the way they are, of URLs. HTTP called roomscheduler.com/room/3/request. See if you can see a pattern here, okay? bookstore.com/book/412/price. tourmanager.com/city, Boston, tour, Tuesday, new. Can anybody try to characterize why I put these under good and those under other? Yes.
At least, and so in the good for the first two, definitely the third one would be a little bit harder just because it's long. But it seems like what you're doing is almost saying like, so after the domain name, it's like class, instance, and then method call.
Right. And if it's something nested, it could be class, instance, class, instance.
Yeah.
It could be like address book /4/contact/3 /phone number /2. So if you have two phone numbers. Yeah, that's essentially the pattern. The pattern is essentially, although there's examples, like if I say address book /3, my third address book, /contact/create, which is legitimate. Now you're a little bit in Never Neverland because there really isn't a contact called create. We're saying no, that becomes a verb. Okay. But that's basically the concept. And you'll see that also mimics to some extent, you know, what some people call the sitemap. It kind of mimics the structure. And what you're really doing is, comes up later. Okay, so at an intuitive level, you got it, yes.
So about the exact ugly example, the third one.
Yeah.
Yeah, the question mark actually is the get request. Is that right?
The question mark is just additional parameters.
Yes. So there's a parameter of the get or post.
Yes, it is in the end of parameter.
So how to and in the two examples, the third one, I think the functions they are actually the same meaning, but how to convert? I mean,
Well,
use the get parameters and turn it into
Right.
slash.
okay, but you don't have to convert because Rails and the whole, actually probably the web server itself, parses it and delivers it to you in a way that you can actually, with very little difference in the code, call something, you know, room, question mark 3 and room /3, even though you're right, this is part of the parameters of HTTP, this is part of the URL.
Yeah.
That difference is basically almost evaporates. When you get to your code, you can use them both equally easily.
So they're the same in Ruby on Rails.
Not the same. You can tell the difference. It's more a matter of, it's not so much a matter of what HTTP or not. It's a more matter of your design intuition. The question mark thing, you know, you want the main part of the path to have I mean, now I'm getting very vague, okay? To have a design feeling that you're indicating some specific resource, and you want the information after the question mark to have a design feeling that it's a parameter of some kind. So search is a classic example. Right? If they search, you often see, you know, room / find, you know, South. Find the room that South is in. This feels very much like not part of the path, and so you would do this. But often in your design, you will be a little bit like, what should it be? Should it be a parameter or should it be part of the path? And by and large, you should make it part of the path unless you have a really good reason to make it part of the path. Now, there was a seminal bit of research done from which came, and you might have heard the term REST and RESTful styles of design. You may or may not have heard it. Some of you probably have. REST stands for Representational State Transfer. And it's a paper about this, about a new way to think about URLs, vis-a-vis compared to before when people would just design them the way, you know, randomly without really, you know, giving a lot of intellectual thought about why they are the way they are. This guy Fielding came up with a framework which was very helpful, and everybody's now following it. And basically, in oversimplifying to the 10th degree, these kinds of URLs are RESTful URLs. And I'll go a little bit deeper into it. I haven't talked much about HTTP yet. HTTP is, well, it's a protocol. It's a language that the client talks to the server. And it's the way in which the requests are made between the browser and the web server to request information. And a request in HTTP has a few important minimal characteristics. Okay? The request includes, most importantly, the URL. It also includes the parameters that he was talking about separately. But most importantly, it includes a verb. Okay? So there are like 7 or 8 verbs, but the ones that are used by far the most often are get, put, post, and delete. You've heard these, I'm sure. And you can think of it as, you know, the request in the end, without worrying too much about the hierarchy, is a tuple of the URL, the verb, the arguments, I think they're called arguments or parameters, the question mark things, I'm not sure what they're called, and a few other things, like the required result data type, and a bunch of other things. But these are the most important. Okay? And so HTTP basically is a language between a server and a client and the server, that sends back and forth a request that looks like this and a response that corresponds to the data type request, and an error code. You've seen 404. 404 is an HTTP error code that says, you asked me for a resource that I don't know how to generate. 404. Okay? All right. So one of the principles, which is difficult to follow 100%, but one of the conceptual principles with REST-like APIs or REST-like URLs is the principle that you want to try to make create the illusion that the URL is talking about one and only one thing, one or only one resource, i.e. /user/4 is user number 4. It could be /user/Salas Pito, user with that name Salas Pito, but it's one thing. And every time I ask the server for that thing, /user/4, in a way, we're trying to pretend as if it was back in the days where it was a file. The file was always there. It's always user number 4, and you get it back every time the same way. And that's important, interestingly, for a lot of different reasons. But one of the reasons is it makes caching makes caching possible. Because now an intermediary can just look at this URL and see that I asked for user 4 before, I'm asking for user 4 again. By the principles of REST, it's the same user, therefore the data I have is good. I can just send it directly without asking the server for anything. So one of the benefits of a RESTful API or RESTful URL structure is this notion that the resources are one and the same if the path to it's the same. That's for a GET. When I say GET me that user that URI, that thing designated by the URI user/4. That's a GET. Yes.
What if we update
Okay. Interesting. Well, remember I didn't say that user 4 has a certain phone number. I just said it's user 4. So user 4. So that principle, for example, says it's kind of like an ID on a record in the database. It says that nobody else can be user 4, but it can say that user 4 works at Brandeis and now he works at Owen. It's still the same user 4. So it could have changed. You mean in terms of caching? Is that what you were getting at? Yeah. In terms of caching, it's the usual cache validation problem. I mean, there's things like, if it's changed, the cache has to know, and there's a timeout. There's a lot of mechanisms to assure that that works correctly. Okay, but that's the GET. Now there's put and post, and that's always a source of eternal confusion. Put is the counterpart to GET, and put means I've got data for user 4, server please store it, put, boom. Okay, and the principle is that if I get user 4 and I put user 4 and I get him again, I'm going to get the thing back. Post is a lot more open-ended. Post is the method, is the verb on HTTP that means this is going to make a change on the server. Typically, for example, if I say /user/new, that request is not a get, it's a post. If I say /user/logout, that's a weird one because that's not a resource. /user/logout, that's a post. So things which are not gets and puts, i.e., not specific elements or resources, tend to be posts. Now you're mostly insulated from this, but you will have to be aware of it pretty quickly when you start writing controllers. Okay. Yeah, so then basically here's the key ones. Get, retrieve an indicated resource. Put is the update value of the indicated resource. Delete is to delete the indicated resource. And post is to create a new instance of the indicated resource often, or other commands. So as I said, one of the most fundamental design questions you have to go through is what should the URLs look like? Okay. One term I saw in reading about this a little while ago is to think of them as directory-like structures. think of it almost as if, you know, in your product. What's your product?
Teaching assistant.
Okay, so if you thought of it as a directory-like structure, let's design your URLs right now for teaching. It's TeachPack, right? TeachPack. Come on, let's get the name right. All right. So TeachPack. So what are the main things in TeachPack? Say what?
Courses, users.
Okay, courses. I hate these pens. This is all I've got. It's almost like I'm better off on the screen. Okay, go ahead. Courses. Let's try it here.
Courses.
I'll push really hard.
Users.
Yeah.
Lectures.
Okay.
Quizzes.
Yeah.
Posts.
Okay.
Feedback.
Okay. Now, let's think about nesting. This is not one-to-many views. This is like nesting. What is contained in what, right? So, what is contained in what? Give me some cases.
There are more. Okay. Quizzes. Inside quizzes, there are quiz questions and quiz answers.
Quiz question, and quiz answer. Okay?
Posts have a post and a post response.
Post, wait a minute, are there
Wait,
sub-objects?
Do you want the actual, like,
Think of it as we're making a static directory structure with subdirectories corresponding to the container
like, do you
type.
mean the IDs and stuff like
No,
that?
no, just at the high, just like what you're doing here. For example, I'm going to guess. Are users contained in anything?
Courses have lectures, I'm sorry. Courses have lectures.
Courses have lectures in them. Okay. Are users contained in anything?
Users, I wouldn't say contained in anything, but
They're a top-level namespace.
yeah.
Okay. Courses have lectures. Are quizzes contained in anything?
Yes.
In what?
Courses, no lectures.
They're contained in lectures. Okay. It's down here. Quizzes.
Posts are also.
Go ahead.
Posts are also
Contained in
lectures.
lectures.
Yeah.
Okay. All right. What else?
And so is feedback.
And feedback is also contained in lectures. Right? Okay? So this is now done. We covered this, right? So we're going to have users up here. Is this fair?
Yeah.
Okay. Now let's design the URL. What's it going to look like?
I don't know.
/ID. Okay. Then what? /3. Huh?
Well, maybe lecture first.
Where? Are we starting a new line?
/lecture.
/lectures. On.
Some number. Yeah.
/3. Done?
Let me get it. Whatever. You can go /quiz.
/quiz. /4. Whatever. So this indicates a specific quiz given at a specific lecture of a specific course. Now, if I wanted to create a new quiz, what would the URL look like?
The exact same, except instead of for, it can be create.
For example, yeah. And if I wanted to look at the topic of a lecture, like what is it about? What would the URL look like then?
We could just stop at the 3.
Yeah.
Assuming that would give you an overview.
Exactly. If I wanted to see all the lectures, what would it look like?
Just 3 options.
Pardon?
Take off the 3.
Yeah, exactly. If I wanted to create a new user, what would that look like?
That would just be users /create.
Yeah, exactly. That's it. And you have to go through all the pretty straightforward, right? A lot of talking for a pretty simple point, right? Let's take another product. Huh? It's a very good way. You kidding? I wrote it. Yeah. So write it down. Get an A. Okay, let's do another product. Who wants to volunteer the product? Anybody? Okay, let's go. Vaporator. Give me the containment hierarchy.
So we have product.
Yeah.
Inside product we have several reviews.
Pardon? Some reviews.
Reviews.
Yeah.
Inside of the reviews we have several comment heads, like we're calling it comment heads, which means like threads.
Comments. Oh, I see. Yeah. Okay.
So aside, but like let's call it thread for some like inside each thread we have several entries.
Okay. Now you're hitting an interesting point here, which is okay. You're hitting an interesting point here because okay, so we have thread. Is it a nested thread?
No, it's not.
Okay.
That's the thing.
It's a flat thing, right?
Yes, it's just like on Piazza.
Okay, gotcha. Okay, let's go on.
So what else do we have? We have manufacturer.
At what level is that?
Well, the manufacturer is maybe above the product.
Okay. Yeah.
Then we have what else do we have?
The users,
What do we have inside users?
user ID, so
Pardon?
user ID.
Yeah. Yeah.
Like these are
Okay. But you're hitting an interesting point here. The interesting point is, I want to find an example where it's even more dramatic. But one thing that occurs here is you could go down to the micro level. You could say comment slash, let's say comment has multiple paragraphs, slash paragraph slash 3, has 10 sentences slash sentence slash 1, right? And the question is, how do you make that choice? How do you decide? Where do you stop, right? Any thoughts? Because you could go crazy, right? How would you, what is the thinking, the thought process you go through as you decide how much of the URL is going to reflect it? Yes.
Maybe some things don't get their own page,
Yeah. So you go by whether it's on a page of its own.
sort of.
Yeah. Yes.
To me, it seems kind of like sort of like when you're making objects in programming,
Yeah.
right? Where it's sort of hard to define, but it's kind of a sense of like, something that is its own thing.
Yeah.
That becomes an object, that gets its own page, that gets
Yeah.
its own spot.
Yeah.
Something that is really sort of part of
Yeah.
that thing does.
So it's kind of a soft design question. Yes, I agree. Yes, go ahead.
I think you look for atomicity.
Okay.
A comment has 100 words, but you want to see the whole comment.
Right.
So I think that's an atom.
Yeah.
So something that you might want to search atomically, I think would be.
Yeah.
Are you also thinking about the purpose of the URL or URI?
Yeah.
Like if a user will in the end bookmark it.
Yes.
So
Exactly.
What will he want to get? And
Right.
The user will certainly not want to get to a specific word inside
Right.
the comment.
Right.
But maybe he would like to get to a specific comment.
Yeah. That's a very, very good point. I mean, that's one way to influence or to inform your design decision is anybody going to ever want to put this on a favorites or send it as a link in an email, right? And that's going to tell you a lot because something that you intuitively want to be able to send as a link in an email, you probably want to make sure it has its own URL, even if maybe it never normally gets displayed by itself on the page. Okay? Maybe not. Maybe those two things are the same. So your point about displaying, do you ever have a page with just this thing on it is equivalent to saying, does it want to have its own URL? Now, I'm giving you the most simplistic or simple high-level example because we all know that often there's sub-pages and pop-ups and all these things, and really there are URLs that are there that the user never sees for filling in, Ajax things and so on. So I'm giving you the high-level design thinking about it that you'll find as you go through it that there's going to be some other odd cases you have to introduce as well. But the one thing we do know is that the only way an action in a controller is going to get called and the only way the server is going to return anything is if there's a URL to say what it is being requested. So if, let's say, there's a pop-up that shows all the most commonly used words in a category setting on a page, that little pop-up is usually will be returned by a URL. So even though it doesn't have its own page, somehow the only way you're going to get the Rails server to do something and return that list is going to be through a URL. But that's the second order, third order design decision. At this level, though, what you need to do is look at your collection of commands or features and be able to answer the question, what does the URL look like for this command or feature? And go through it. And that's what I meant when I said this is one of the earliest and most basic design questions. So it's going to help you not only structure your product in a logical way, but it's going to help you understand the amount of work you're setting out to do. Every time something gets displayed, it has to have a URL. And you want the URLs to have a very rational structure, a container-like or directory structure-like, with a noun followed by some kind of an indicator followed by noun. Now, for example, let's say you wanted to find, you wanted to have a URL that returned a list of all the posts in January, right? This is like a blogging system. Or it could be this thing, all the posts. So I have slash, God, so irritating. Literally can't see it. Okay, I'm just going to say it. Let's see, maybe it's red. What?
You can type it.
What? Tap it? Type it. Yeah, I know. That's what I should do. It's really pathetic. At this point, I don't even have to be here. I could be home on Skype. It's like, okay, let's see. What shall I use? I'll just go into my text editor, enlarge it. Okay, so I could say product 3 / comments. Now I want all the comments in January. What do I say here? What are some of the possibilities for what this URL is going to look like? Yeah. /January is one, absolutely. What else? What are the possibilities? Yes.
Well, now it's kind of parameter. So
Yeah.
Use question mark.
Yeah. Date equals or month equals January. Right. Exactly. What about if I wanted the range? What I want all of the there's a custom choice. I want January through March. Yeah. Go ahead.
So this will definitely be a parameter with something like from month to month. Or from
Exactly.
date to date.
So the interesting thing is from equals January to equals March. And what you'll see here in these three examples, in these two examples, what is the controller? What controller is getting called? Comments controller, right? Not the product controller, the comments controller. And the comments controller is receiving two parameters, or three parameters. Two parameters in this case. In this case, the parameter is going to be product equals 3. And in this case, the parameter is going to be product equals 3, arg1 from is equal to Jan, arg2 March is 2 is equal to March. And if you put a breakpoint in your code and look at that controller and put a breakpoint there, you'll see those things in the parameters. And I'll show that to you on the next class. In this case, again, we have the comments controller being called this time with trying to think. It's going to be the comments controller, but it's the January action on the comments controller. In this case, I never touched on this. In this case, it's probably going to be the index action, because it's essentially the equivalent of this, and this would be calling the index action. Give me all the comments, but with some additional parameters. So in this case, it's the product, the comments controller index action, and that's true for all these. True for this one. Oops. It's true for this one. In this case, though, it's the comments controller with the January action. That means, okay, so this is a design choice. I think probably I would not like this design. I think I like these designs better because there really isn't a January thing on the server. We're generating a thing. And that's, for me, from a design perspective, I like that better. But it's definitely a design choice. Okay, let's go on to the next product. Who wants to go next? Yes, go ahead. What are the major, what's the containment hierarchy look like? Yeah, they have tasks. Yeah.
Well, tasks breaks into dynamic and static. So those are actually two different things.
Okay, that's a good one. Do you want two different, are those just,
They are in fact two different things.
Right.
We definitely
So
store
you
them
have
as
the
different things.
dynamic test, that's under,
oh, under them?
Yeah.
and then static test.
Okay, got it. Are these, okay. Are there any things which are just plain old tasks? So every task is either a static or a dynamic task. So it's not clear that you want this as a containment hierarchy, or whether you just want tasks to return one of two kinds of things. If you thought of these as files in a directory,
They're quite different things, but
they're both tasks. Yeah, okay, it's a design choice, yes.
But like, would you use the question mark thing to get all your dynamic tasks in one month, or would you want to be able to have this condition to have their own page?
They need to have their own page because they have separate views.
Sure, they need to have their own page. You can never display them intermixed on a list. You do display them intermixed. Yeah, so anyway, it's a design decision. My guess is that you don't have that. My guess is that you have a bunch of tasks, and if you have a task 4, will you also have potentially a dyno task 4? Could they have the same ID?
No, we have the tasks. No, separate.
Because another possibility is that it's static tasks and dynamic tasks, like that.
Well, for you, this shows tasks, and then
This is not necessarily the same as the database scheme. This is the illusion you want to create for the outside world.
probably just tasks.
Yeah, I mean, it's a design question. I have to explore a little bit more deeply to give you actually good advice, but it's a good one to show that it's not at all clear.
I don't know, because we display dynamic tasks separately in a separate window at one point.
Yeah.
So static tests and dynamic tests are displayed together, but dynamic tests are specifically displayed separately.
Right. Okay. Continue.
Calendar.
We're at what level?
That should be under users. So the same level as tasks.
Okay. Calendar.
For now, anyway.
What else?
We have the productivity profile
Where?
under users.
Profile. Yeah. What else? That's it? Okay.
And then the settings.
Are settings per user or global?
Per user.
They're per user.
Okay, so and that's an interesting one too, because settings is an interesting one. Whether you want to have a URL that's /user/1/setting/3, the third setting, or whether settings is a blob that you either get and put in one shot. It's again a design decision. It's not clear cut. If you go to the question of would I ever want to email this URL, you wouldn't want to email URL to one subsetting. So probably it does not have its own URL. But it's an interesting gray area. Okay, good. Everybody get the idea? You guys back there haven't asked much. You're all good? You good? William, you good? Okay. All right. All right, let's go on. Okay. Let's see where I am. I've got 20 minutes to go. There's 2 appendices here that are relevant to this. It's up to you whether you read them, but if you go back and look at the page, you can check them out. Let's see. I have a choice. I can either Let's talk about the teams. How are the teams doing? I know. Here's what we're going to do. Stand-up meetings. We're going to do stand-up meetings because I'm collapsing two things together. So what's a stand-up meeting? If you read today's page, you know that it's a concept coming out of the Agile world, and we're going to do a perversion of it here because we're doing a perverse version of Agile. But basically, the principles of the stand-up meeting in the world of Agile. Yes?
Well, I can try.
Go.
So the basic principle why you stand is in order to keep it short.
Right.
Because people don't like to stand.
Right.
Which works in real world. And usually I do it as a kind of ritual, like in the morning.
Yeah.
Some do it in the after the whole work day.
Right.
Some do it in the start. I
Right.
think no one does it in the middle.
I think you can find a million variations, so probably somewhere. Because remember, your workforce could be all around the globe, so there's no such thing as morning.
Well, okay. No, but then standing up together will be difficult.
True.
Because one of the principles is
I was at a group where they stood around together in front of a Skype session.
a lot.
Yeah.
Well, but like the one of the principles is that you stand up right in the place where you work. You
Right.
don't go somewhere.
Right.
To meeting.
Right.
And you just quickly go over what what are the goals for today.
Yep.
And what are the problems which appeared last day. And that's it.
No, there's actually three pieces to it, but that's the concept is exactly that. The concept of Agile is rapid and iterative work with quick response to problems. And so the notion of a stand-up meeting is you stand up, the whole group stands up, you go around to each member of the group, and each one says three things. What I achieved yesterday, what I completed yesterday, what I'm expecting to complete today, and any obstacles that is getting in my way. Like I didn't get enough sleep, or my debugger's not working, or I ordered a new chair and it hasn't arrived yet. Whatever it is, literally, because then the Scrum Master's job is to solve those problems, and it avoids the I didn't get anything done all week because my chair didn't arrive and I was just waiting, that kind of thing. So we're going to do that. We're going to go through each of the teams, and one designated person in the team is going to stand up and give us the update on what's happened with the team over the last week. And I'll let you guys self-select what order you go in, and I'm just going to wait until something happens.
I don't think I'm the best one.
One person. Okay. You can stand in place. You don't have to move. Stand where you are.
Well, don't we have to talk to each other?
Oh, yeah. No. I'm not going to go around the room. That's why it's a modified thing. But yeah, talk to each other. Go for it. Okay.
So
Loud for all of us to hear. It's for all of us to hear.
I thought we were doing a private meeting.
No, we're not. No. That's why I said a perverted version of the stand-up, which is every team is going to stand up one person, and that person is going to talk to all of us to update what's going on.
Okay, so our
Loud.
obstacles are we've had some group changes,
Yes.
some member changes.
Yes.
What we've completed so far, we've completed the schema and 2/3 of the dossier, and I guess
Specific
what we're gonna-
achievements.
specific achievements.
Database schema.
Database schema.
Yeah.
We made our first push to GitHub, right?
Oh, really? That's cool. That's cool. Hey, guys, listen to this.
Uh,
First push to GitHub.
We got through half of our final paper prototype.
Uh-huh.
What we're gonna finish today.
Yeah.
Probably nothing else.
Yeah.
But over the break.
Again, perversion means it's a whole week, not a day.
We'll probably finish the rest of our final paper prototype.
Yeah.
The dossier.
Yeah.
And
I'm going to try to have a kind of working prototype of our schema up on our little side branch.
Nice.
To GitHub.
Uh-huh.
that's
Good.
all I got.
Anybody else want to add to that?
Yes.
Okay, good. Thank you. I see you're standing up. Eager Beaver, go for it.
Vaporator, what we did this week, George put together a very nice schema.
It's German style, though.
It's still very nice.
It's got these betas in and this interesting letters, yeah.
See, we got our Git up last week, I think.
Uh-huh.
We got Pivotal Tracker. We added a bunch of stories to Pivotal Tracker.
Cool.
Oh yeah, Google Drive.
Google Drive. We got a Google Drive. We got a meeting agenda.
Yeah.
We got a second prototype. And
Stakeholders.
stakeholders.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, that's right.
Different roles, different user
Uh-huh.
roles.
Yeah, we
Yes.
identified stakeholders, different types of users.
Okay, that's good.
To help with our UI design. Anything else this week?
We moved all of our documentation onto GitHub.
Uh-huh. Oh, cool. Very cool.
Yeah, so we have a full Git.
Any obstacles? Anything's holding you up, making you not go 100 miles an hour?
George was sick last week.
I would say last
But
week.
he-
And
He still got
He
everything
caught up.
going.
Yeah,
We
yeah.
had a dead laptop until a few days ago.
I know.
we have to figure out where to put things because now we have Google Tracker, we have Google Drive, and we have GitHub.
Yeah.
And for example, whenever you have a file, you have to decide either to put it on Google Drive or to put it on GitHub. Whenever you have a task, you have to decide either to put it up on Google Tracker, where you are forced to do things in the story style.
Right.
And if you have things like George is owing $5 to Stephen, it's a weird story. But like you would
Yeah.
not put it in the Pivotal Trigger. Pivotal Trigger does not offer you to enter like tasks.
However, that story is in our Pivotal Tracker.
And why? No, I don't know. Is this to buy supplies? Is that basically it? Yeah.
So yeah, we have to figure out where to put things.
Yeah, right. Classic. Yeah. Good, thanks. Anything else?
Next week, I'm going to be working on coming up with some pros for the website.
Uh-huh.
That's my big goal is to try and get a glossary put together and some sort of information on vaping.
Cool. Okay, great. Who wants to go next? Yes.
Alright, so what we
Team name. RTP. Yeah.
So we've essentially finished our database design, developed the schema, and we kind of like discussed like what data we want to collect.
Yeah.
Because that's actually a really big part of our project.
Yeah.
We went over our UI design.
Yeah.
We have the paper prototype, all that. We actually went and had it reviewed. So we had like an initial user review.
No way. Sweet.
Got some
Got a
input.
lot of feedback.
Yeah,
That's
we have
right.
to go through all of
We
that.
changed a bunch of stuff because
Sweet.
Really like, solidify that.
Excellent. That's great.
Um,
Hear that? They did some user testing. Come on. First to user test. Woo!
We have our initial Ruby framework up on GitHub. I think we're still looking into some calendar gems, so there's some specific
Yeah.
ones that we can.
Yeah. Check out jQuery, right? Yeah, it's full of stuff. Yeah, excellent. Good stuff.
We have our dossier all compiled on Google Drive, so it's all set up. Pivotal Tracker is pretty set up too. For next week, what we're gonna do is we're gonna like finalize the login page, get the UI going, all the design, the HTML,
basic
Um,
HTML,
all done.
Yeah, good.
And,
Good. Start simple. Absolutely.
Yeah,
Yeah.
get us so we can actually like have a user log in.
Yeah.
And register a user.
Yeah. Good.
We're gonna set up the controllers for that, so we can go back and forth with the database. And I know.
skeletal
yeah.
stuff.
Yeah, and then the database needs to be set up for at least the initial user table.
Good.
For blocking progress, I think we need to look into controllers a little bit more.
Okay.
Not really sure about the rest of you. I wrote this really late at night.
Uh-huh.
Sorry.
Anything to
I
add?
just needed more time to work on this. I haven't had a whole lot of time.
Uh-huh.
Starting next week.
Yeah.
Also, I'm going to be building a presentation on this. So
Sweet.
maybe it's something we can show to our mentor when we do our
Excellent. Yeah.
meeting.
You're going to build a presentation to use for your interview too, right?
Yes, it's a technical presentation.
Multi-purpose. I like this. Yeah. Excellent. Good.
That's what I say. Man.
Yeah. Go. Next team.
What's going on?
What is going on?
What is going on? What's going on? What's going on?
Yeah.
We actually know we called it what for a little bit. It's weird. Anyway, so I'm gonna start with our hurdles because it's the most recent.
Yeah.
Yesterday we had a 2.5-hour meeting.
Yeah.
Trying to set up Heroku, which we succeeded.
Yeah.
We were having a lot of trouble pushing it. We were having a lot of trouble getting Postgres to work locally after we got afterwards.
Yeah.
Postgres was only working when the thing was on Heroku.
Yeah.
So we think we figured it out.
Uh-huh.
It took us a while to figure out like we push it to the Git and then it goes to Heroku. We learned that we could push it twice. We didn't
Yeah.
understand that.
Yeah.
So that's working, which is really cool.
Awesome.
We-
First to Heroku. Yay!
By the way, should get home through.
Homebrew.
Home-
Yeah.
Homebrew is great if you have a Mac. Yeah.
Yes.
Like if like for Ruby, like if you're missing like a gem or
Yeah.
something, like it messed up you like for hours.
What homebrew?
Like
Homebrew
if you have
broke you.
Homebrew, like it finds the
The-
tabs and stuff.
Yeah. Homebrew is an app on the Mac which lets you install anything. You can say brew Git, brew RBN, brew Ruby, brew Rails, whatever, and it collects all the bits for
So
you.
if you're getting a mistake, stop Homebrew.
Yeah, brew is great for Mac. For you guys that don't have a Mac, I'm so sorry. There's something else. Okay, good. Excellent. So we got first to Heroku, we got first usability test, we got first to Git. Okay, all right, that's competition, no, but still.
We've started implementing jQuery and HTML5 also.
Whoa, okay.
And we have like Google Drive, everything's pushed to Git and everything. And for next week,
Yeah.
we're going to be working on. We've split into teams.
You know the next week is vacation, right?
Yes.
Okay, just check. Go ahead.
For next week, we're
Yeah,
working on.
yeah.
This is our homework
Yeah.
break that
Yeah,
we
yeah,
assign to each other.
Yeah.
Is I think Jacob and Sherrod. Well, Sherrod kind of like goes to everyone,
Yeah.
sort of. Just checks in and does a little bit of everything. Jacob's going to be doing a lot of the beginning database stuff.
Uh-huh.
Samir's going to be looking for a good layout, and coloring, all that stuff, the UI.
Good, great.
And I'm trying to set up the map
Uh-huh.
thing, which is, it's not like set up, but we have it on there,
Uh-huh.
and it looks kind of cool.
Sweet.
So
Very good. So your obstacle is Heroku, but you overcame that.
it took so long.
Yeah, I know.
It's so confusing.
I know, it is. Okay, next team.
Our team is share assistant, and we have just cancel some team member change.
Uh-huh, yeah.
So we only have 2 now.
Wait a minute. There's
We
nothing.
only have 3, and Joe is sick again.
He's got asthma.
Yeah.
His parents came down.
And we have split the job among us. Like the front end will be done by Eddie and Joe,
Uh-huh.
and the back end we have 2 types of back end. One is Ruby on Rails.
Yeah.
There are controllers, views.
Yeah.
And the other one is the background query process.
Yeah.
And the Ruby on Rails will be split among of 3.
Yeah.
Among us, and the query stuff will be done by me. So,
Okay. What are you going to do for the background process? You have an idea on that?
I just asked and talked with Amin, and he suggested me to do some job master to connect the job from the Ruby on Rails application and distribute the job to the job workers.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, there's several Ruby-based background processing things. Yeah. Make sure you don't build it. You use something that somebody else built.
Yeah. First, before that, I need to write a wrapper. Wrapper to the Yahoo API. I need to build a wrapper class.
Check if there's a gem. There probably is a gem already.
I checked that
Okay.
they are all dated.
They're all dated. Okay.
Yeah,
Yeah.
they're all
Well,
dated. I've checked it before.
remember, NIH stands for
Not
Invented here.
not invented here. That's a disease of software and computer people. I only use things that I invented. I'm not saying this about you. I'm just saying in general, NIH is a disease to be avoided at all costs. Use other people's work. You checked. You didn't find
Yeah,
anything.
yeah, I have checked the journey.
I find it hard to believe, but I will check for you too.
Yes. I think the most recent update one is 2 years ago.
Yeah. The thing to look on, by the way, tip here, when you're looking for a gem to use and you want to decide if it's out of date, you look at when was it last updated, but you also look at how many people are using it. If you look at what's it called, the library of, I think it's called Ruby Toolbox, something like that, it'll show you a catalog of all the gems, and it shows how many people are using it and so on. So that's how to check.
Okay, I will look at that issue again.
I'm not saying you're wrong. I'm just saying I want to make sure you really seriously check.
Some options you can change. I told you sidekick, rescue, and
Right.
e-stock. They
Yeah.
all have updated.
Yes.
and-
That's for the background processing. We were talking about the Yahoo.
We are talking
Yeah.
about the queue.
No, I know.
Yeah. Those are the ones. Those are the well-known ones. And pick the simplest one because you have the simplest needs.
Currently, we have the database scheme that's the legacy from Nick.
Uh-huh.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And we have we already set up the Git repo.
Cool. And any obstacles? Any blockers? Any problems that are interfering with your 100 miles an hour?
Is running through people and people have very heavy workload.
Uh huh.
Yeah, that's the main obstacle.
Yeah. So you need more hours. I'll work on that for you. I don't know. I ain't
4
gonna
hours
have
a
to-
day. That would be an
Yeah,
excellent.
25th hour. Yes. Okay. Thank you. Next product. Who else? There's one left, right? Or not? Did we do them all? Okay, perfect. So great. So we're out of time. Tuesday we're going to talk about controllers and look at the last the dossiers, and then Thursday is the after vacation is the meeting. Okay. Thank you. Have a good vacation, everybody. Rest well.
Great. I haven't had time to start.
Thank you.
Yeah, so many